Welcome everyone to the Adversity to Advantage podcast. I'm very excited. We're just warming our voices up because it's a really early start for both me and Scott Newby, who's on the other end of the line. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hello.
Thanks for being with us. So Scott, well, I'm so excited to have him because we're going to talk mental health. We're going to talk the recent campaign that he's been working on, and that's going to be starting on the 22nd of January. But mostly, he's on a mission to make 2019 the year that positive mental health is promoted and supported in every workplace in the UK, which is very aligned with what I do. So we're so excited to have you. Scott, give us a little sense of the work that you do at the moment and why you're passionate about it.
Yeah, so just over a year ago, I left my employed career, if you like, with the financial services with Lloyd Banking Group. I set up my own company called Newby. And initially it was a mixture of looking to support organizations in terms of their well-being, their engagement, but also their kind of business processes and their strategic sort of planning as well. I guess just for the nature of it, I ended up doing more of the strategic planning and the process improvement side of things, a bit of training. And yeah, I'm hugely passionate about well-being and well-being in the workplace and people kind of, removing the stigma around depression and mental health and being more sort of understanding and tolerant of it, and particularly in the workplace because we spend so much time there. But I always felt like I couldn't do that until I'd shared my story. So it was a bit of a chicken and egg scenario, which I know is a bit silly, but it's just the way it was. And then in October last year, I don't know, I just had an overwhelming urge to share my story. October last year, I shared my story, and then about 3 months ago, and since then, the weight off my shoulders was incredible, and then just the passion behind it since then. So I had 3 months, and I've just been flat out just working on ways that I can work with clients and to improve workplace well-being in terms of getting the message out there through campaigning and the kind of I feel like quite lucky I've got a voice. A reasonable sort of network and thinking let's use that voice for good. So
but it's a really big step to leave employment. I did that about a year ago, and just that roller coaster, right?
Yes.
Was that the plan? So before you told your story, were you already thinking, actually, I want to work in this space, or I want to shift, how I work?
It was no, not really. So I think in financial services, I was there for about 12 years. Breaking up a wee bit. I was there for about 12 years and just went straight in there after university, as you do, into the financial services sector. And then I was always doing well, was getting promoted, and without having to not that I'm very hard working, but not having to push myself too hard for the next level. I ended up in sort of senior positions, and then in 2014 had a bit of a sort of my first kind of, I guess, main sort of episode of depression that I've had since 2001, which was when my mum passed away, and then 2014 had that, and a bit of time off work, got some treatment through therapy, got to the point where I felt like I was, inverted commas, better, and went back to work and just went back into kind of normal everyday life again. But I always had this itch that I wanted to scratch around. I want to do something good. I want to help people. I'm not a doctor, so I can't, or a surgeon, but I am pretty knowledgeable and educated on mental health. I've been in senior positions within large organizations, so I've seen it done well and I've seen it done very badly. And obviously having suffered from it myself, I've got the kind of experience around it. So then I went back to normal life, if you like, and then it just, as it often is with these things, it's a slow downward spiral. And then in 2017, it kind of hit me again. And it was that point where a combination of my own mental health sort of taking a bit of a nosedive and this kind of desire to do something differently and a bit more kind of purposeful, what led me to make that decision to leave the bank. It was interesting talking about earlier about having kids. So I've got two kids, and my youngest at the time was 1 year old. So yeah, it was a really daunting prospect, well-paid job, all the security that comes with that. But yeah, I don't regret it for a second. I've had so much quality time with my children, not just the actual quantity, it's the quality. I was working late in the bank. When I was getting home, my head would be thinking about it, and I wasn't really present with them, even though, if you know what I mean. So it's been life changing. It's been tricky,
It's challenging, right?
yeah, my wife very supportive, so I was very lucky in that respect because, saying, no, I'm going to leave my well-paid job and go out on my own,
Follow
and
the
sitting there with a
dream.
blank piece of paper.
That's so exciting, though.
Yes, exactly. I
But
know.
tell us just a bit, like, so you obviously had a pivotal moment when your mom passed in 2001, and different episodes of depression and awareness around mental health. And I'm curious, before any of that happened, what was your awareness, or, as a man in financial services, like, did you understand anything about mental health before you were hit by it? Did you have the language around it, or did your life experience actually open your eyes to any of that?
Absolutely, yeah. So I wouldn't have really had much understanding of it at all. I certainly didn't feel that kind of level of uh, able to go and talk about it. Absolutely. So, yeah, when my mum passed away in 2001, obviously you have grief like anyone would. You're some kind of bereavement. But what actually kind of transpired through that was actually I realized there was a little bit more at play than just kind of grief. And that's when I realized there was some sort of poor mental health there, depression, and got some support through student council at the time, that just automatically happened because I was at university.
Can I just pause you? Because I'm curious
Yeah, of
about
course.
how you know the difference. Because lots of people will experience grief, and
Yeah,
grief can go like that, right? So sometimes you feel okay, and then something gets triggered, and it's like tricky to, it's not a linear process of beginning to end. And so at what point, or I don't know, what were the clues that you thought, actually there's something more going on with my mental health?
actually, yeah, there's a really good point. Actually, just if I rewind slightly, I actually do. I remember that very first moment around this feels different, and actually, it was before my mum passed away. It was when my mum she got breast cancer for the second time, and I was at university in Edinburgh. And my mum was down in Lincolnshire where we grew up, so quite a far away. And she rang up and said, this would have been sort of early 2000s, and said, sorry, 2001, said, oh, I've got cancer again. And I kind of, I was living with a few mates at uni, and I just kind of took it on board and thought that's fine, and didn't really, just kind of, she'll be fine, we'll get you, and just kind of brushed it off. And then I remember about a week later, just sitting in the living room, and I lived with 5 of my best mates at uni, and I just remember sitting in the living room, and I just felt this over horrible feeling of not being able to breathe, just the realization kind of came crashing home. And I remember just thinking, I felt lost, didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to talk to, whether to go and leave the room. And I remember just leaving the house because I just had to do something. I remember just jumping on a bus, getting the bus into the city centre of Edinburgh, walking around the city, the gardens there, and just horrible. Felt like it was never going to end. This feeling of, and I think that was the moment where I realised, wow, this is. And then fast forwarding again, I think after I got those feelings after my mum had passed away, and I kind of realised that actually I had probably suffered from it a little bit in my teenage years.
Okay.
But at the time, you probably,
just didn't
that
know.
would have been 20 odd years ago, what I mean? So no one really talked about it. And it was just, I just put it down to, a bit of teenage angst. But there was stuff in my childhood, although I enjoyed a lot of my childhood, there was stuff that wasn't so good. And I think now retrospectively, I've kind of dealt with that through therapy. And so it was part of me. But yeah, it's a great question though, because what is the difference between waking up in the morning and feeling like, oh, I don't want to go to work today, which we all do at some point, and actually thinking, I can't go to work today. And and it's a tricky, very, very tricky. And I think it took me a long time to realize actually it's more going on here than just, I'm tired, or I can't bother going to work, or it was I started to realize actually it was a bit more powerful than that. It had a bit more of a hold on me.
Would you identify with, would you say that you've had any rock bottom moments where it was sort of a crash point that was a deciding moment of, I know for me, I resonate with that terminology. I was suicidal and realized that, I had a choice at that point that I could either end things, or I had to figure out how to ask for help or how to do something. Would you say that, because I don't know what your culture was as well growing up around asking for help, and you're talking about going to therapy, but what that process was like for you to mentally go, I've got to ask for help. I don't know what else to do.
Yeah, so no, absolutely there was. So yeah, when I had first therapy in 2001 after my mum passed away, it was just almost standard because it was student therapy, and I was at university and I missed 6 weeks. Yeah, and I'd missed 6 weeks of uni, so I was on the verge of having to say, right, you're gonna have to make a decision whether you repeat or not. But it was very helpful, but felt like it was dealing with the grief, and that was it.
Of course.
But then for the next 13 years, there was moments where I felt this, I felt very down, and I was thinking to myself, but I was just saying, come on, stop being weak, man up, go and put yourself together, all the usual stuff you do, as you do. And then in 2014, I had probably my first major sort of serious episode of it. And I'm very fortunate in that suicide's never been something that's been an issue for me or anything I've considered, which I feel very lucky about. But I was the kind of couldn't get out of bed, just, and not even down all the time, but just like emotionless, just completely numb to everything. And that was quite frightening. And it was at that point I started talking to my wife about stuff that she'd obviously aware there was some stuff going on, but stuff I'd never shared with her. And at that point, with help from her, I went and booked in to see a therapist. And I was very fortunate. The therapist was amazing, brilliant, one of the best in her field and life-changing for me. So that was the beginning of the recovery process for me. So yeah, 13 years of kind of telling myself, come on. I mean, I'm a guy, I love football, I played football.
Yeah.
I go to the pub with my mates and have a beer. It's my demographic. The thought of even 5 years ago, the thought of coming out and saying, guys, I'm struggling would, no, just wouldn't happen in my, not because there's anything wrong with people I'm with. It's just that demographic we're in. We just don't talk about it.
It's just learned behavior, right? It's like what's okay and what isn't. You wouldn't even think of speaking in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when I played football and then I had an injury and I went on to coach and manage football, I was always, a captain of the team. I was always a leader. I was always kind of 99% of the time very outgoing and vocal and sort of trying to be motivational. So I think people wouldn't expect it of me as well. So for me to turn around and say, I'd counsel maybe 2 or 3 hours before about going to coach football training, and I'd get one of my kind of assistant managers to go and to take the session for me. And I would just say, I've got a cold or something. But really, there was occasion where it was because I was having a kind of dip with my mental health, and
that's a really good point, because that's what lots of people do, right? Is they report a physical illness because that feels like they don't have to explain it as much, or they imagine there'll be less stigma or people will understand, right? And so, yeah, I'm curious. So you obviously were playing into that a little bit at first as well. And I'm curious about your work environment, because traditionally financial services is pretty hardcore as well, as far as show no weakness and work your ass off and all that sort of thing. Yeah. And I know that your work now is very much inspired by having seen like what well-being looks like done well and what it looks like done shit, right? It sounds like you've had the full range, right? We can swear on this podcast. By the way. And so what was your experience, I guess, just from the workplace? Because you're describing not being able to get out of bed sometimes. I mean, what was that bit like? Yeah,
it's funny because I think for me, there was some good and bad stuff happening at work. I don't think work was ever a big player for me, because I think for me personally, it was more, there was stuff that had happened in my life and in my childhood that I'd never dealt with. And then when I got therapy, basically it was like lifting, at the time in 2014, I was 33, and it was like 33 years of lifting the lid. And talking about stuff I've never spoken about in my life. Wow. And it was really difficult, but life-changing in terms of being able to deal with it. But yeah, in terms of work though, there was, I've had some good managers, some horrific managers as well, bullies. Never had too much of an impact on me, but I'd seen people around me where, people would be crying and so on. That's the kind of impact they were having. And I was thinking, this is just wrong. And how making people feel really, really horrendous. And it's interesting what you were saying, because as I was saying, I was in financial service for 12 years. And as I was there, the absence stats related to stress, mental health, depression increased year on year. But that's just the people that are admitting to it as well. Yeah. So all the other people that are, I've got the flu, a chest infection or a cold. Yeah, absolutely. That aren't talking about. So it's even, obviously it's significantly higher than what the stats are showing as well. So yeah, I think there's still, my viewpoint on it is that there's lots of good stuff happening. Last year there was a lot more good conversation around and better awareness. That's a good starting point. Yeah. And a lot of organizations outwardly looking at talking and saying the right things. My experience and my kind of issue with it is that you've still got all these maybe middle managers, and if they're not buying into that, of their, that kind of way of thinking, if I'm an employee, it doesn't matter what the kind of propaganda, the outwards message of the organization is. If my manager is saying, oh, that person's been late today, they're lazy, or, or they're off again, they're at it
Or
kind
the
of thing.
return to work as well. If people come back to work after an absence due to depression or something like that, and nobody knows what to say, everyone avoids it and it's super awkward. And, it makes the return to work like really challenging as well. Like, what do you say? How do you reintegrate back into the workplace?
No, absolutely. And one thing, so in my last role within financial services, I was looking after an operation of over 100 people, and I had sort of managers that reported to me that managed teams of people. And sometimes I'd be chatting to guys, and someone had been off for a week, and they said they'd been off with a cold, whether they had or not. And it'd be some of the language would be, oh, they're lazy, they're at it, skiving, all that stuff. And my mentality was like, innocent until proven guilty. Why don't you, when they come back into work, first thing you say to them is, let's go for a coffee and have a chat. I'm concerned you've been off and you're not feeling very well. What's happening? Are you okay? Build up a trusting relationship, like you're saying there. And then it becomes an easy return to work, and you start to build up that trust rather than just automatically default to, thinking the worst of people. And I think it's just human. It's just actually asking managers to behave a bit more human, and just, we don't know what's going on in people's lives. Things could be happening and it often is behind closed doors, so, be mindful of that we're not robots. We are human beings, and not every day is going to be exactly the same. So,
and I know this is going to sound like common sense to us too, but what's the benefit of that? What's the benefit of a manager simply treating somebody like a human, assuming that everyone's got a story, taking that time, because there's often the fear that, I haven't got the time to, give people hugs and do the fluffy stuff and drink the coffee and whatever. Like, what's the benefit for the workplace of that simple bit of extra humanity?
It builds that trust and respect. It's incredible. I think, if you can empathize with people and just be human as a man. People, when I started management, people used to say, "Oh, you need to be completely detached from your workforce. You can't show weakness and all that."
Right.
But actually, having a bit of vulnerability, you can't be best friends all the time and in the pub after working. There's got to be a level of kind of professionalism, but you can have a friendship. You can build relationships and trust, and be vulnerable. And people then respect that. And I think being a good manager is it's about being authentic. So if you're just being a genuine human being and sitting down and having a coffee with someone, saying, I think that trust then builds up, and then next time they're not well, they'll open up. If they have a bad experience with their manager, then they're not going to open up again, or they're just going to continue to, hide the truth from them. And I think it's so important just to be, and I understand sometimes it's because the pressure on managers is really high or whatever, and the pressure starts, bad media story, and then the pressure filters down from the directors, and I know they're having a tough time of it, and they're stressed over work, so then they maybe take that out on their staff rather than giving themselves just a couple of minutes to breathe and say, do you know what, I'm having a difficult week because of all the other stuff, but it's not their fault, and I'm going to still treat them like a human being and build that trust with them.
And that comes down to self-awareness, right? So the manager understanding their own stress levels, their own trigger points, how to keep their story over here, but how to connect and be vulnerable in order to create a safe space for other people to be the same.
Absolutely. Yeah. And from my experience, don't get me wrong, it's being a manager is really, really tough. And especially if you've got teams of maybe 20 individuals and they're all different, and you've got to treat them all differently. And one minute you're, someone's parent, the next minute you might be a counselor, the next minute you've got to be the person that's down that need to perform better.
Yeah.
All this stuff, and it's very, very difficult. I mean, they don't get the guy often, managers often get this training to do that. So it does often become quite overwhelming for the managers, and the stress levels of having to manage the people in the team, but also deliver performance for their organization. And it is about self-awareness, but it's also about, I guess, then the next level up is understanding these guys are dealing with people. They need support as well to, often they'll be sponges. I always think the managers are often like sponges.
But then there's often not like good peer support, like when you have your management meetings, to be able to be real there and provide support on that level so that you are able to continue to look after people in that way. I feel like it would be simple tweaks, wouldn't it, within your management meeting or within your 2-minute coffees or whatever, to just really see each other. And so there's two things I still want to cover on this podcast. One is, because I want to get to your campaign because I'm fascinated by it.
Yep.
But I want to, before I go there, I just want to say, like, bring us up to speed now. So you've got depression, you've had some rock bottom points, you've gotten support. you've got two young children, you're in business by yourselves, like roller coaster central, right?
Yeah.
How do you look after your own mental health now? Like, how do you manage yourself?
Good question. And all that, I'm loving it. And I've never felt better since October. That weight off the shoulders and doing something that I have a purpose for it's been an absolute life changer for me. But yeah, in terms of there's a couple of presentations I've done, and I've talked about, I call it finding your football. Now that's because I love football, but the premise of it is, and it's something that I got through therapy in terms of understanding it, is however busy life is, you talked to it there, you're young kids, doing the school runs, working for yourself, doing all the bills.
Relationship, having to make money. Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you get up in the morning at 6 and you're sitting on the sofa at 9 at night with the kids just gone to bed, and you think, where's the last 15 hours gone? And you're just exhausted.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's really important, I think, and I used to think it was selfish of me to do this, or to think about doing this, and that's where I kind of changed my mindset, is to give an hour or two for yourself, even if it's just an hour or two a week. It's so important to find that. And for me, it used to be football, whether it was playing football or then managing. I had a really bad injury in my mid-20s, so I couldn't play after that. And so a couple of years ago, I took up golf. So golf has now been like my football. I've replaced it. And every, it takes a few hours to play golf as well. And it's out in the fresh air. And, and I quite like playing on my own sometimes, but often I have a few mates that I go playing with as well. And that just away from it all, escapism, chatting with your friends, out in the fresh air, playing a bit of sport, you might not be every week, but even if you're doing that once or twice a month, and it's a bit of you time away from everything. And I think that's so important. And it's easy. I think naturally as human beings, we'll put ourselves last. So it's so easy to say, well, actually, if I'm not working, I should be with the family. If I'm not with the family, I should be working.
Yeah.
And actually trying to find that time. But I think it's now I'm a better husband. I'm a better dad. I'm a better businessman. I'm a better everything if I'm mentally well, because I'm giving myself a little bit of time. And so find that little bit of time actually makes everything else, you're better at everything else in life. And it's just trying to get into that mindset of,
it's reframing how you think about it, right?
Yeah, and it could be anything. It could be whatever, something you're passionate about. It could be learning a language. It could be knitting. It could be football. It could be golf. It could be, anything.
Connecting
swimming,
with
whatever.
People. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, well, that's a good point. Because I think previously, because I wasn't giving myself that kind of time to do something maybe kind of a bit more kind of healthy, then the default is that you get to the point where you feel like you're a bit overwhelmed and you need some time, and then the natural thing is to go to the pub with your friends and get drunk and I think
which is a depressant, and the cycle continues, right?
Yeah, and I think it's important to have something that is yours that you enjoy, and you're very kind of protective of, and you make sure you do it however busy you are, because otherwise your default might be to do something that's a little bit more destructive, like, well, I'm just going to go to the pub because I need a release. So there's nothing wrong with that. I go to the pub sometimes with my friends.
There's nothing wrong with that.
But not being the natural go-to. Having something that is for you. Some people love going to the gym. It could be anything, but it's being very selfish about that, I think, and just saying, this 2 hours a week, this is my 2 hours.
I love that. I needed to hear that as well, because I've been like I'm getting a bit sick. I've just been driving hard at work, and I just need to take the time. It's not selfish. It's like looking after myself. What are your warning signs? Like, do you have because you've got some more self-awareness now about your depression, and do you have some warning signs, like 5 or 10 steps before that you kind of realize, fuck, I've got to do the stuff because I forgot about it. What are your little warning signs?
Yeah, absolutely. There's things that my wife will probably say as well. Yeah, I recognize them. Yeah, it's things. Irritability is a big one for me.
Yeah.
So I never lose my temper. I'm very quite laid back. Probably because historically you didn't talk about stuff, so you just absorb it all.
Yeah.
And, bit of a closed book. But then I start to get irritable, which I notice, and I can feel it building up inside of me. Noises. People eating their lunch, and it's like, so things like that. I can tell. My sleep is really. I've always had problems with sleep. Sleep becomes more and more broken. Overthinking. In the middle of the night, waking up, and generally just feeling a bit rubbish. It's interesting. We touched on it earlier. Is because I've always pushed it to one side in the past. Physical illness would end up taking hold of me, whether being physically sick or having a stomach bug or whatever, because I wasn't listening to it. My body gets to the point of saying, right, we need you to stop. And so that's other signs. I'll start to actually have some physical signs of being ill.
I love that point,
and
though.
it starts to
the connection between mind and body. and how our body is often telling us something, whether we're exhausted, whether we're irritable, whether our stomach hurts, or whether our headaches or things that start coming up. It's like asking ourselves, what's the connection and what do I need to take responsibility for to look after my body and my mind?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember I've done a bit of research on it, and it's so connected. And I remember when I had my kind of final kind of depression episode when I was still working in financial services in 2017. I knew I could feel it building up, but
Okay.
I just started a new job. I was pushing myself through. It was fine. And then one night in the middle of the night, I was sick as a dog, more than you could even imagine, probably the sickest I've ever been. And it was my body saying, we're not letting you go to work tomorrow. And the next, obviously, I physically couldn't leave the bedroom, so my body had made me say, stop. And I probably wouldn't have done it at that point, because mentally it'd be difficult, but I'd be pushing myself through.
Yes.
So yeah, it's amazing how the physical, but I guess what we really want to do is get to before that point, the preventative actions where you just see it maybe starting a tiny bit.
Sure.
And then you start doing this right, so going, and that's then going to, so now if I do start to feel it, I'll say, right, I'm going to go and pick an hour off, go and hit some golf balls or whatever, whatever it may be.
Yeah, that's the ideal, is to have that. Well, and not even preventative when we see the signs, but to have habits in place that we know we just need to have that stuff in our lives, right? It can just be
Absolutely.
pretty tricky in our fast-paced society, which leads us nicely into your campaign, right? So the campaign is, correct me if I'm wrong, #SeenNotScreen. Tell us about the campaign, because this podcast is going to be published on Monday the 21st. And the campaign is starting on the 22nd, I believe. But if the posters are out there already, people can find it on your website. So give us a sense of, what inspired you to do the campaign? What's it about?
Yeah, no, thank you. Yeah, so #SeenNotScreen. And it was when I shared my own story in October for the first time. So that was the first time I kind of opened up to the world, if you like, about my own kind of challenges. And I wanted to do that because of my kind of, I thought a lot of people could relate to that and it would help them. And then since then, I just had an overwhelming urge to do something really positive. And the more I've kind of started working in that space and looking into it and being more aware of my own kind of habits now, I started to realize that one of the biggest things is the disconnection now between human beings, because everything is done through our phones, whether WhatsApp, texting, all that stuff.
Emails.
Social media. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's 24 hours a day. It's there. So that actually now people don't connect, I think, as much as they used to. I notice it now. I could be sitting in a friend's house or in the pub watching the football with a mate, and sometimes a couple of guys will just be sitting and they're on their phone the whole time. And you're thinking, back in the day, you'd sit and you'd watch the game together and you would just chat, and you just sit and you just talk. There'd be no kind of distractions, or is there something else on a text that's a bit more interesting? And I think that's become such a huge factor. And technology. Technology is a good thing, but it's the education around how we use it. And I think one of the reasons that mental health is becoming more and more of an issue, and particularly obviously with young people, is because there's that lack of that human connection. And it's scientifically proven that the importance of that is, you cannot kind of overstate it. So the campaign is, we launched it on the 15th of January. It was about a month before Christmas. I just had this, I had this overthinking in the middle of the night where I have all my best ideas.
Yeah.
Had this idea. I want to do something to try and move people away from their screens, spend more time kind of chatting with each other. Yeah. On the 15th of January, it went out kind of through all the social media channels.
Yeah.
Just kind of sharing what the campaign's all about and just trying to get as many people involved as possible, leading up to the 22nd of January, then when hopefully as many people as we possibly can all over the world will kind of get involved. And then
how can they take part? End of it, what do they do?
So the best thing for them to do is, if they follow on any of the main social media, follow the hashtag #SeenNotScreen, they'll get all the details. They can go onto our website as well, which is www.newbycore.co.uk/SeenNotScreen, and all the details are on there. And basically what it is, on Tuesday, 22nd of January, go and meet a friend. It could be a friend, it could be a colleague, it could be a neighbor that looks lonely, because they've, whatever it may be. Take yourself away from your kind of normal habits, maybe of sitting on your phone at night, and could be during the day or at night, and just sit down, and if an hour, 2 hours, however long it is, just put the phone on silent, put it away for that time, and just enjoy having a chat. And it doesn't have to be talking about feelings or mental health, because it's talking about, actually don't always have to have that tag on it. It's just actually the human connection and that preventive stuff, and just feeling, having a good chat basically. And then just at the end, take a quick picture on their phones of you with your friend, and then just post it onto social media with the hashtag seen not screen. And the reason that is just trying a bit of fun around it, but also trying to encourage other people to do the same, because although it's a campaign for a particular day, and hopefully, if it's successful and we get really good response rate and it helps people, we'll hopefully make it an annual thing. But it's really about the behaviors off the back of it. So then, the week after that and the week after that, people become more mindful and, put a bit more time in for going to see a friend they've not seen for 6 months. And I feel it myself, I've got a busy life, and I don't see my friends or people I used to work with anywhere near as much as I used to, where I used to probably pop around and see them. It just doesn't happen anymore. So it's just trying to encourage that human connection. And there's a poem that went with it as well, which I wrote.
I just watched it this morning. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, my acting's not very good doing the poem's better than my delivery. No, thank you. But it's funny, this is one of the, I guess, upsides of being an overthinker, is that, again, that came to me over about 3 nights in a row just before Christmas, in bed at night when I couldn't sleep. And then one morning I just got up and I just brain dumped it in about half an hour, tweaked it, and that was it. So I just wanted something to kind of catch the imagination and catch that whole, there was life before technology. Technology is great, but let's merge the two together. Because
it is great, but I can see it for myself and I see it in other people. If I'm in the queue for something, or if I'm on the tube, or if I go to a course or an event, something, because I try and put myself out of my comfort zone to do stuff where I have to integrate. But if you're in that awkward little 5-10 minutes where you're standing by yourself and, you're kind of, rather than sitting through the discomfort and going, hey, let me make the effort to connect to somebody, it's so bloody easy to take the phone out and just be like, let my eyes be there so that I don't have to deal with this discomfort. And as we know, our human biology, fight or flight, we don't want to deal with the discomfort if we don't have to. We want to stay safe, right? And so our phone becomes this safety mechanism where we can just stare at it and not have to deal with the being seen. So being seen as well as seeing someone else.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So I just I think the challenge really is for us to notice when we're doing that, and be like, am I just scrolling inanely on Instagram for no purpose whatsoever? Right. Because that just tends to be the thing. It's actually I've handled all my notifications. I'm good, but it just feels safer, right? I'm actually tonight I'm going to an improv class, which is totally terrifying for me, but just simply to train myself to be out of my comfort zone and take the risk in connecting with other people, because then you teach yourself that the shame thing or the fear thing, it's just in our head, right? And then the benefit of that type of connection is just so good for the soul, right? It just allows us to lead mentally healthy lives.
So much, yeah. I mean, that's, we're complex, but we're still simple.
So simple
as human beings as well. That human connection is natural. It's what it should happen, and the benefits we get from that. And you're right. We all do it. If I'm out for a meal, for example, if there's just two of you, say as soon as the person you're having dinner with goes to the toilet or whatever, the first thing you do instantly, and back in the day, I try to think to myself. So I was first year at uni, 18, when I got my first phone, and I used to think, what did I do before that? I just would have just sat and just watched the world go by. And and it's the same with sitting watching the football at night on telly. Whereas I used to just enjoy just watching the game and losing myself in it. Now everyone's tweeting each other about what's just happened. Well, I'm watching it, so why are we tweeting each other about? And I just think you end up not watching it. You just end up becoming attached to this phone. And your point that you made about the whole scrolling thing. Here's a little tip actually, which I've made myself do for this, is I've moved my main kind of icons, social media like Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc., to not my first screen on my phone, because you would go to check a message or a call or an email that you were waiting on, maybe at nighttime as well, and then you just start, before you know it, half an hour later, you're just, because you're on there, so you quickly go into your Facebook app or whatever. I was thinking, this is ridiculous. You just end up scrolling for half an hour for no reason.
But then how many times also are you at, I'm at a conference, and rather than being present and taking in the information, you're tweeting or you're Instagramming the fact that you're there, or people at concerts, people at their kids' school plays, everyone's seeing it through the recorded screen. And I'm just like, where do those videos go? where
Yeah,
do they
exactly.
even go, right? And it's so much about the evidence that you've been there rather than immersing yourself in the experience, which with the people that you're with, right? Which totally makes you miss out, and I think is definitely correlated with the rise in mental health issues.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about, yeah, I've checked in at this place, you know, and I'm having a great time rather than actually having a great time. I think that,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's true.
something I'm so mindful of. When I go, if I'm at a football game or a concert or whatever it may be, spending time with my children, I try and just, as you say, I always think, well, photos and videos are cool sometimes, but probably very, very rarely going to look at them. So get one or two, yeah, absolutely. But the rest of the time, just sit
Be
and enjoy
there.
them so much better than watching it through a tiny little phone screen. So yeah, no, it's so true. But it's an education piece, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just how we've become
Yeah, we have no
conditioned now, I
precedent
think.
for,
Yeah,
what the impact of technology. So we're going to add all of that into the show notes. And of course, we'll be all over social media on the 21st, putting out
brilliant.
this
Thank you.
conversation and the campaign. Finally, what advice would you give to a young man who, back in the day, put yourself back to your initial episodes of depression
Yeah,
and difficulty, and or even before that, when you knew as a teenager that now in hindsight, you recognize that
yeah.
something was going on for you. What's the first step that you think a young man could take in noticing that or in doing something what advice would you give to them?
I think for absolutely, I would say if you're feeling sort of feelings that you think aren't right and you're feeling a bit more down than probably you do normally or whatever it may be, don't just like I did back then, and don't just be like, oh, there's people worse off than you, or just be very dismissive of it and just kind of like, it's fine, get on with it, because it builds up then slowly over time. Go and talk. I mean, I cannot. There's obviously there's lots of different things out there these days, and so many different things work for different people, whether it's through doing something exercise, whether it's mindfulness, whether it's massage, whether it's medication, whatever it may be. There's lots of different things to sort of help us. For me, there's nothing more important than just talking to someone. And I think my experience is that the thought of telling people about it, talk about it, has been so much worse than the
Yeah,
actual telling people about it. I
there's
can't
so
think.
much fear, right? What's the fear of
I don't,
judgment, of being seen as weak, like that kind of stuff, right? Yeah.
absolutely exactly that. Feeling being the weakness, yeah, the judgment, absolutely. And I think but actually, I've not had any negative from people I've spoke to. I've not had any negative kind of comeback on that, and it's the thought of it is worse than the actual doing of it. And I think people are thankfully, getting a bit more mindful of it. And it could be, so yeah, if you feel things aren't quite right, don't kind of go into your kind of ball and think, oh, I'm just going to kind of ignore it. Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't matter. It could be a friend, it could be a stranger, it could be a teacher, it could be a colleague, it could be a therapist, it could be anyone. It doesn't have, you don't have to go and tell the world about it. You just have to find that one person that you can talk to that helps you kind of open up and makes you, you're sharing your problems with, and then can maybe offer you some advice and point you in the right direction of where support is. So I think that first conversation is so important.
And not only is it not bad and terrible and all the fears that we think about, but actually it's exponentially good, right? You talked about the relief that you often give permission for other people to then be real. So the connection's deeper. You then have the benefit of living your authentic, true self, for you finding your purpose and there's exponential benefits, aren't there, to just talking about what's really going on?
Absolutely, yeah. The weight off your shoulders, you're kind of feeling less kind of, I guess, closed off and less kind of suffocated because it's out there, and people are aware of it. And absolutely, the amount of people, when I shared my story, the amount of people that came back to me, kind of private messages as well, saying, I've suffered with this for 5 years. People I knew, people I didn't know, and people I never would have thought of that had suffered. And it's just amazing. It just the fact, and that's why the whole campaign. I just want to get people just being more open with each other, feeling comfortable to talk about anything and everything, and just and having that support of each other. Talking, I mean, the old cliche, a problem shared, but it's true. Just talking to people, that connection makes us feel a bit more. Feels like we're less on our own. We're not isolated. You say we've got that support of someone that if we need to, they're there.
Amazing. Scott, I feel like we could talk all day.
I know, I'm a talker for sure, yeah.
That's fine. Well, we're in similar spaces, so we could definitely talk all day.
Yeah.
But for now, Scott, thank you so much for your story of your vulnerability, but also for the positive change that you're making in the world. I'm excited about the campaign and supporting it. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. No, thank you very much for having me. Cheers.